What's up, you guys? Void here, coming back at you all with another Commander Deck Tech video for another patron. Finishing up yet again Deck Tech requests for March. Decided to do one for Justin here. He's been a pretty sweet patron so far, so I thought I might as well give him one Deck Tech request for this month since I'm doing it for every other patron anyway. And he wanted me to do Grenzo Dungeon Warden. Converted mana cost 2 but has X cost, so you can pay however much mana you want to. He is red-black for a 2/2 legendary Goblin Rogue. He enters the battlefield with X+1/+1 counters on it, so that is going to be pretty important because you can pay 2 mana, just a generic 2, to put the bottom card of your library into your graveyard. If it's a creature card with power less than or equal to Grenzo's power, put it onto the battlefield. Now, Justin didn't really specify what exactly he wanted me to do with this deck, just that he wanted me to make a good Grenzo deck. And there are some different variants. There's the ones that are more or less just about graveyard synergies, putting stuff on the bottom of your library, and taking advantage of good creatures in Rakdos colors. I also wanted to take advantage of the Goblin synergies because there are actually a lot of good ones in black that I don't think a lot of people know about, and Grenzo of course being one of them. I definitely thought this was a good idea. As always, we're going to look at the lands here first, and we have Auntie's Hovel. I apologize if I get these pronunciations wrong, but I'm trying my best here. It comes into play kind of like a lot of the other lands from Lorwyn. You get to reveal a Goblin card. If you don't, it comes into play tapped. Taps for both colors that we need. And as far as utility goes, we're going to be playing a Bajuka Bog, but the rest is going to be good Rakdos mana fixing. We have 18 artifacts in the form of Skull Clamp. We have a lot of 1/1 Goblin tokens. We can get some card draw off of them. Soul Ring, pretty basic. Then we have Tel Jalad, Stylus, just a 1 mana artifact. It taps to put target permanent you own on the bottom of your library, which can also be a pretty cool way to recycle ETBs, get some more usage out of them. It's never a bad thing. It's also a cool way if you want to protect something and then bring it back later with Grenzo. Then we have Darksteel Pendant. Is indestructible, so that's a really cool thing. It's going to stay out there for a while. Has an activated ability of 1. You can tap it to look at the top card of your library, and then you put that card on the bottom of your library. It is a maze, so you don't have to, but this is yet another way that you can put a cool creature on the bottom of your library and make sure that it's something that you can get with Grenzo. Illusionist Bracers, technically Grenzo's ability is an activated ability, so if we equip this first, then we get to do it twice. So hopefully we can get multiple creatures on the bottom of our library, and we know exactly what they are. That way it works smoothly. Then we have Lightning Greaves, for the same reason why we put it in any other deck, good Shroud. And then we have Rakdos Signet and Talisman of Indulgence. Both of these are going to be good 2 mana rocks that get us whatever we need in these colors. Then we have Rato Lantern, yet another cool graveyard bottom of the library synergy. You get to pay 3 mana and put a card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So yet another cool trick. You get to recycle creatures from your graveyard, put them on the bottom of your library at the very least, but you ideally want to get them back with Grenzo. Then we have Swiftfoot Boots for the same reason that we have Lightning Greaves, but Hexproof is a little bit more flexible. And then we have Ashnod's Altar, because we have a lot of good creatures. We have ways of getting them back, and we have ways of putting creatures in our graveyard on the bottom of our library. So creatures as a resource isn't necessarily a bad idea in this deck, especially if we can get mana for them. And then we have Crystal Ball. The cool thing about scrying is that it's also a cool way to get a creature onto the bottom of your library. And even if you're not doing that, you're still capable of controlling what cards you're drawing into, which is never a bad thing with scrying. And then we have Heartstone. Activated abilities of creatures are going to cost 1 generic less to activate. It doesn't reduce the amount of colored mana, but it reduces generic mana, and it does work for everybody's creatures, so keep that in mind. It's just another way that we can take advantage of Grenzo's ability. Then we have Vessel of Endless Rest. This is a pretty cool mana rock. That's the main reason why I'm putting it in here. It's 3 mana, taps for 1 mana of any color, but it enters the battlefield and we get to put a target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So yet again, going to fuel our Grenzo, make him more viable, while also getting us more mana. Then we have a Door of Destinies. We have a lot of goblins in here, so we should be getting a lot of counters on it, so whenever our goblins want to attack, we have a lot of power and toughness. Then we have a Goblin Charbelcher. This is yet another cool card that is capable of getting us some good advantage off the top of our library, but also once it's done, we get to put those cards on the bottom of our library in any order, the keyword being any. So whatever happens, maybe we don't get anything off the Charbelcher, we get to put whatever good stuff we want to on the bottom of our library, so that's pretty good. Then we have Teferi's Puzzle Box, the same exact idea. It is a little bit random, not necessarily what you would expect in this deck at first glance, but the cards that you do put on the bottom, you put on the bottom in any order. Then we have a Coat of Arms, because the same thing as Door of Destinies, it's a little bit more flexible. You don't have to have the setup first in order to really take advantage of it, but if you have a lot of goblins, you're likely going to win the game because of this. And then we move on to our creatures. We have 37 creatures. For the most part, they're goblins. We have Goblin Chirurgeon. We get to sacrifice a goblin to regenerate a target creature. We have a Goblin Welder. We can choose an artifact on the field and choose an artifact in a graveyard and basically just swap both of them. Doesn't matter if our opponents have them or we have them. Pretty cool one-drop creature. Legion Loyalist. This one is fantastic. If we are capable of triggering the battalion, then we're just able to dominate with goblins, because First Strike and Trample is very difficult to deal with, and if we have the numbers, if we have Coat of Arms, something like this is going to help us win the game even more so. Then we have Skirk Prospector, kind of the same deal, sacrifice a goblin, but this time we get to add 1 red to our mana pool, so really cool mana source. Then we have Frog Tosser Banneret, kind of like the other ones, has haste, but this one is going to make our goblin spells and rogue spells cost 1 less, and technically Grenzo is both. We definitely have a lot of goblins, so giving them cost reduction is pretty sweet. We have a Goblin Recruiter. You get to search your library for any number of goblin cards, put them on the top of your library in any order. That is a fantastic card, especially if you already have all of your lands, your mana. Getting more goblins drawing into them is fantastic. Grenzo Havoc Razor, the other Grenzo. This one's pretty sweet as well. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage, you have 2 different modes. You get to go to target creature, or you get to exile the top card of that player's library, and until end of turn you get to cast it as though it was any mana to cast it. So pretty cool options, a lot of cool ways to attack our opponents, and we're likely going to trigger a lot of stuff. Then we have Metallic Mimic. We choose a creature type. Whenever a creature of that type enters the battlefield, it gets an additional +1/+1 counter. Pretty sweet creature, especially in Tribal. Then we have Sting Scourger. Has the echo cost, so we have to pay it or else we sacrifice it. When it enters the battlefield, we'll return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So that's a pretty cool way of dealing with our opponent's creatures. In Rakdos colors, we have ways of killing creatures. We don't necessarily have ways of bouncing them, which is actually pretty underrated, but we get it on a goblin too. So if we get this off of Grenzo, it's never really a bad thing. Then we have Warren Instigator. Whenever it deals combat damage to an opponent, you get to put a goblin creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. The Double Strike, really sweet creature. Then we have a Weirding Shaman. Has an activated ability where we can sacrifice a goblin to get 2 1/1 black goblin rogue creature tokens. So you're trading 1 weak 1/1 goblin token likely for 2 1/1 black goblin tokens. I like the flavor. Yet another cool black goblin. Then we have Boggart Harbinger. When it comes into play, you search your library for a goblin card, reveal it, and then put it on the top of your library after you're done shuffling. So yet again, another cool goblin tutor. Then we have Cabal Slaver. Not actually a goblin, but whenever a goblin deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card from his or her hand. So if you have multiple goblins attacking, this guy's going to force your opponents to discard their hands likely. That's a lot of goblins you can swing out with. Goblin Chieftain. We have a lot of goblin lords as well. Haste. Other goblins you control are going to get +1/+1 and also gain haste. Goblin King. All of your other goblins are going to get +1/+1 and Mountain Walk. So really sweet there. Goblin Matron. Yet another goblin tutor. This one's going to get you a goblin to your hand, however, so it's a little bit quicker, a little bit better. Goblin Sharpshooter doesn't untap during your untap step, but that's okay, because whenever a creature dies, you get to untap it. So every time you want to tap it, you're going to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. If you have Ashnod's Altar, if you have another sack outlet, you can really control when creatures are dying and then just keep tapping it, untapping it, dealing more damage. Goblin War Chief. Cost reduction for our goblin spells and also going to give them haste. Going to speed up the deck a little bit more. Mad Auntie. Other goblin creatures you control are going to get +1/+1, so yet another goblin lord, and you're going to regenerate another target goblin when you tap it. Vial Smasher the Fierce. Another cool Rakdos goblin, but even if it's not for synergizing with goblins, it's still in here because it's a pretty cool Rakdos colored goblin, and you're going to be dealing a lot of damage anyway. Beetleback Chief going to get us some more goblin tokens, so we pretty much get 3 bodies for 4 mana. Not the worst thing when we have things like Coat of Arms. Then we have Boggart Mob. Champions a goblin, and whenever a goblin you control deals combat damage to a player, you get to put a 1/1 black goblin rogue creature token into play, so you get more tokens for dealing damage with a bunch of goblins. So it's pretty cool that it triggers for each individual goblin, so you're going to end up getting potentially more and more tokens. Then we have Cater Walling Boggart. Each goblin you control can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures, so pretty much menace. And the same thing for elementals, but we don't really care about that. But giving menace to all of our other goblins is pretty sweet because a lot of our goblins aren't going to be massive, so making them more difficult to block is what we want to do. Goblin Ringleader has haste. Whenever it comes into play, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library. Put all goblin cards revealed this way into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So while putting stuff on the bottom of our library isn't going to be a Goblin. We still have some other creatures that we could choose from, so it's not the worst thing in the world, but more than likely we want this for getting Goblins to our hand. Then we have Junk Troller, puts a target card in a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library, so really sweet. 6 toughness defender, gonna stay on the board, and it's gonna help us out with Grenzo. Then we have Grenzo Mob Boss. No doubt about it, we're playing Goblin Tribal after all. Getting X11 red goblins for each Goblin we already control is pretty sweet, and it's going to get out of hand. Coat of Arms, Door of Destinies, any sort of Anthem, pump effects are going to be ridiculous with Grenzo. We have Mog Catcher. We can just pretty much pay 3 mana, tap it to cheat into play something from our deck. I think that is more than awesome. Then we have Murderous Redcap. Really cool because we don't have to care too much about the persist, having it go away eventually, because we can just keep bringing it back with Grenzo if we have a way to put it on the bottom of our library, of course. But having it come back, dealing at least 2 damage to a target creature or player is still pretty sweet. Then we have Perforos, God of the Forge. We have the potential to have a lot of creatures enter the battlefield from the bottom of our library over the course of a game, so dealing a lot of damage for each ETB is pretty sweet. Solemn Simulacrum, good solid advantage, colorless creature, gonna get you some lands and card draw at the same time. Then we have a Tuk Tuk Scrapper, another way to get rid of an artifact. It's gonna deal damage for each ally you control, but doesn't really matter for allies. Matters more as a good goblin that can get rid of artifacts. Then we have Wart Boggart Ante. Has Fear. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get to return a goblin card from your graveyard to your hand. So really sweet. Goblin Tribal, Rakdos colors, auto include. Then we have an Epitaph Golem, yet another creature that's only in here to synergize with the bottom of our graveyard. We get to put a target card from our graveyard onto the bottom for just 2 generic mana. Then we have a Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker, yet another goblin, gonna get us some more good creature tokens off of those ETBs, which is really sweet because we also play a Siege Gang commander, gonna get us 3 1/1 goblins each time it enters the battlefield. And then for good measure, if we can't really do much with our Goblin Tribal theme, we have a Zealous Conscripts to combo with that Kiki-Jiki, go infinite, and then help us win the game. And then our last creature is going to be a Goblin Marshal, a whopping 6 mana, I know, right? Really cheap creatures, goblins are. Has the Echo, so you have to keep that in mind whenever it comes into play or is put into a graveyard from play. You get 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, so yet another cool way to get some more tokens. Keep bringing it back, you get even more. Then we move on to our enchantments. We have 4 of them. We have Quest for the Goblin Lord. Whenever a goblin enters the battlefield under your control, you're going to get a quest counter, and if it has 5 or more quest counters, creatures you control are going to get +2/+0. But goblins are already small, making them bigger is never a bad thing. We of course have Goblin Bombardment. We can sacrifice a creature to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. Again, putting creatures in our graveyard's not a terrible thing, especially if we can get some damage out of the deal. Then we have a Phyrexian Arena. More advantage, it's going to help our consistency out. Rakdos doesn't always have the best consistency anyway. And then our last enchantment is going to be a Shared Animosity. Whenever a creature we control attacks, it's going to get +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So if we want to swing out, this is the perfect card to do it with. Doesn't boost the toughness, but still going to make your creatures massive. We have 1 sorcery in the form of a Blasphemous Act. This isn't necessarily the best colors for sorceries, especially if we want to go with Goblin Tribal, but if you have to go with 1 sorcery, Blasphemous Act is never a bad one. If you want to upgrade the deck, I believe it is still under $200, so if you want to go with things like Demonic Tutor, you could definitely do it. But for the sake of making this deck a lot cheaper, sorceries had to be cut. And then we end the deck tech with 3 instants, our Rakdos Charm, Terminate, and Chaos Warp. Rakdos Charm is sort of the Swiss Army knife of the deck. Can deal with graveyards of your opponents, can deal with an artifact, or it's going to punish the token player at the table. Gonna have it deal 1 damage to each controller for however many creatures they have. Really awesome card. Terminate is just straight up creature removal, and Chaos Warp is going to deal with whatever problem permanent you might be facing. But anyway guys, that's going to about do it for this deck tech. Let me know what you think about it. Thanks again Justin for being an awesome patron and requesting this deck idea. You guys feel free to leave any suggestions, but as always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.